This is Ambazonia Calling. News, analysis, commentary, opinion, editorials. Ambazonia Calling is a co-production of Africa Freedom Network, the Missions Tribune, and Compass Free Press. Welcome. My name is Ntumfoyn Herbert, and I bring revolutionary greetings from our studios in Washington, D.C. to all of you, friends of Ambazonia and fellow Ambazonians on Ground Zero and across the globe.
The European Parliament has urged all 28 member states to suspend any form of cooperation with the Cameroonian armed forces. I am Innocent Chia.
They are basically calling on Mr. Biya to back down. My name is Tapang Ivo.
All of you leaders, or so-called leaders of Ambazonia, are guilty as charged. This is Lambert Mbom.
Surely, Ambazonian women will not allow themselves to be confined to the political kitchen in this revolution. Or will they? This is Sia Jimbo Ambe.
If the enemy is making no distinctions, why are we busy hurting ourselves with such foolish, divisive rhetoric? This is Willie Brod Ade.
Some young fukas are begotten, not made. This is Veronique Fetimfe.
People are being indiscriminately massacred by French Cameroon forces.
Cameroon is into its second year of war in Ambazonia, and victory is as elusive as the French becoming the first country to recognize Ambazonia. This is Tani Jude Agua Ozugan.
Editorial LEBIALEM, Assistant Commander, Red Dragon.
The world cannot claim to be seeking lasting peace in Cameroon if it chooses to speak only with the colonizers and not with the recolonized people of southern Cameroon. This is Robinson Aredambe.
This is Nafrida. The corn and that house is that old woman's cathedral.
Hello and welcome again to Ambazonia Calling on this Easter Sunday. Thank you very much for spending Easter Sunday with us. It is also a very special day for Ambazonia. It is the 58th anniversary of the adoption of Resolution 1608 XV before the United Nations General Assembly, when 64 countries voted for the independence of Southern Cameroon, 23 against, with 10 abstentions. This is going to be a longer edition than any one we've done before. Hopefully you enjoy it. To all of you, a very happy Easter again. Music from Vikram. Lyrics, Sukhagda Raul Yelgla. The tunes are from Devraj Coach Chela, singer Suman Natakani. Happy Easter. I'm going to try to move the trains along as fast as possible. So let's get going with our editorial for the week. Here's Lambert Mbom.
The European Parliament came out of its cocoon this week, and for once, an European institution ignored the pleadings of French colonialists in their midst and adopted a resolution that sends a message, albeit not a strong enough message, to the colonialists in Yaoundé. It was long overdue. Yet, what the European Parliament passed by way of resolution is in the eyes of many too little, too weak, and perhaps too late. At least, we can say that the European Parliament, if only for once, spoke with one voice. Can we say as much of Ambazonian liberation movements? Are they doing right by this revolution by speaking in so many factions? by each of them mounting their own diplomatic missions or leading self-defense groups that consider each other enemies. While what may be considered the right thing is in the eye of the beholder, in the eye of this editorialist, one of the most important right thing that should have been done a long time ago, or as our people would say, long before since, is for all our liberation movements to collaborate or work in partnership. Too many excuses have been offered as to why it is not working. No excuse is good enough, and the damage we do to our cause, notably on the diplomatic front, is ridiculously high. In June 2018, I witnessed when a petition was entered into the records of the U.S. congressional hearing on the Cameroons. Signatories to that petition were ARC constituent organizations. I ask our people and our leaders to close their eyes for a slight second and imagine just how much more enriched and strengthened that petition before Congress would have been if it had also been signed by the consortium, the SCNC, the IG group, and God alone knows who else was not on it. Imagine just how much richer and strengthened the efforts of Cho Ayaba's A-Gov-C before the European Parliament this week would have been had every one of those we call leaders of Ambazonia humbled themselves, had they all climbed down from whatever high horse they are riding to append their signatures to each petition we take before the international community. Is it really too much to ask? There is enough blame to go around. Take it from me. All of you leaders, or so-called leaders of Ambazonia, are guilty as charged. Cho Ayaba's A-Gov-C would like to argue that they invited the other movements to join them in lobbying the European Parliament. But here's the problem. Did A-Gov-C really want them on board or not? If they did, how come they boycotted an event like the ASCPC conference in DC, calling some of its organizers enablers and collaborators with the colonizers? Can A-Gov-C really blame the others when what goes around comes around? At the same time, can the others say they sincerely want Cho Ayaba and the organizations he leads in the fold when their surrogates are on a long leash and granted permission to demonize Cho Ayaba? Like I said, every one of these leaders and every one of our movements is guilty as charged. And part of that guilt is the fault of the people of Ambazonia. It is you, people of Ambazonia, who are in the army of surrogates, demonizing anyone and any movement with which you do not agree. It is Comrade Sako Ikome who once in his days as an activist advised all Ambazonians never to fall in love with their preferred group or preferred leader. Instead, he said, fall in line in support of the revolution and in support of Ambazonia over and above your preferred group and leader. Congratulations for those who sincerely seek collaboration and are working to make it happen. Those who are still holding out. It is not too late to get in the fold. Even before a unified front is built, may we recommend that no other diplomatic mission on behalf of Ambazonia be carried out as solo missions. We are a people and a nation, not a conglomeration of self-seeking, wildly ambitious leaders and factionalized organizations. And lest I forget, be reminded that none of you has received any legitimate mandate from the people of Ambazonia to proclaim yourself King of Ambazonia. This is Lambert Mbom for Ambazonia Calling.
What Cameroon has done to us, I want you never to forget. The pain they have brought to bear on this generation, I want you never to forget. Not out of hate, but so that the next generation will remember and make sure they do the things they are supposed to do, never to go through this again.
I will continue to play my part to ask the people of Southern Cameroons to take their revolution into their hands and continue the fight to liberate themselves.
I'm sorry to say, because of France's policies in Africa, in French Africa, The state of La République du Cameroon do not have any pressure on them to find a way to resolve this issue because they are always thinking that no matter what happens, France will always be there to give them coverage.
Still ahead in this edition, we have The Devil Unmasked with Professor Emmanuel Tatamenta. We have a winner of the Nyamfaka of the Week. And we are not done until you have heard our letter to Joshua. So stay tuned, kick back, relax, and enjoy Ambazonia Calling. Here's Innocent Chair with the first part of our news wrap-up for the week.
On Wednesday, the European Union Parliament called on the African Union to step up efforts in mediating the conflict. Otherwise, it says the conflict should be put on the high agenda of the UN Security Council.
The European Parliament has urged all 28 member states to suspend any form of cooperation with the Cameroonian armed forces and, in particular, as regards military training, logistical assistance and delivery of military and security equipment. The amendment further calls for the EU and its member states to immediately suspend arms transfers to Cameroon in line with Council Common Position number 2008/944/CFSP. Amendment 12A, read above in its entirety, was a later add-on to an initially toothless resolution that passed the European Parliament April 17th, in between which time the Southern Cameroon's Liberation Council, SCLC, had unanimously issued a 6-page, 23-point extensive response featuring substantive measures to redress the levity that was otherwise contained in the preliminary draft, mostly addressing Maurice Kamto's lost elections, Boko Haram, and never making any mention of the abducted leadership of Ambazonia in the dungeons of La République du Cameroon. The SCLC, in its concluding point, stated, quote, "We have called upon our people of Southern Cameroons, Ambazonia, to remain strong and stand ready to resist, right down to the last man standing, any attempts from wherever and by whomever to continue our subjugation." End quote.
They are advocating for a resolution to be passed against Cameroon for 3 things: crimes against humanity, war crimes, and genocide. My name is Tapang Ivo. I am the spokesperson of the Ambazonia Defense Forces.
At the same time that the SCLC was preparing its response to the EU draft, the AGOV had multiple responses, including a raucous round of applause from the spokesperson of the ADF, Tapang Ivo Tanku.
It is all thanks to the Ambazonia Governing Council's diplomatic meeting with the EU last week or 2 weeks ago.
Long before Amendment 12A was added, as pointed out at the top, the resolution seemed to mirror exactly what the AGOC asked for and pushed for.
They've pushed out exactly what we gave to them and presented to them.
Many Ambazonians and independent observers agree that the resolution is too timid and lacks teeth.
They are basically calling on Mr. Biya to back down and to strategically make a U-turn on its actions in Ambazonia.
Even with the current amendment calling EU member states to suspend military aid to the armed forces of Cameroon, the resolution still falls gloriously short of claims by AGOC's spokesperson that the resolution will be backed by a military option, going on to cite possible NATO action.
When a resolution is passed, like that of Libya, it is always backed by a military option.
By the end of the day, the ADF spokesperson confessed that the more probable outcome will be for the Biya regime to face more scrutiny on the part of the 28 member states of the EU.
Expect 28 member states that are all democracies to be watching and following keenly on the outcome of their actions.
In the meantime, the Senate of Cameroon has condemned the April 17th resolutions of the European Parliament and invited the EU representatives to come and see for themselves what an island of peace Cameroon is. In his April 19th response to the EU, Senate President Marcel Ntumfoyn reminded the EU of Paul Biya's commitment to democracy and the territorial integrity of Cameroon. It would be recalled that the recent visit of the Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs in the U.S., Tibor Nagy, to Cameroon began unraveling the challenging and changing disposition of the international community to the despotic kleptocracy that has held Cameroon in trance and Ambazonia captive for 58 years and counting.
Long line to come down. 6 trucks, even some Mercedes and they inside them.
An unidentified Ambazonian lady reported Monday morning via her cell phone that 6 truckloads of colonial forces were rolling into Balinyonga at the beginning of the week, firing indiscriminately at civilians and groups of women, children, and elderly stuck in mountaintop hideouts overlooking the deserted town.
When they were zoom, I wear a red cap. I don't even move my cap. They captured me because they sprayed and I sprayed and then they motor the worker. Would the stand is saying, oh, but you know, zoom and parley for scenes on thing. Yes, rich people. Yeah. Why, Papa God in heaven?
Multiple sources speaking to Ambazonia Calling on condition of anonymity say Balinyonga has been a Waterloo for the terrorist forces of La République du Cameroon. Some sources stating that as many as 80 soldiers lost their lives over the course of last week alone in Bali. Reports from DONGA-MANTUNG state in the northern zone of Ambazonia also state that several troops met their demise following an ambush by Amba boys. According to our sources, La République du Cameroon terrorist troops received a tip about an Amba camp, but before they got to it, there was counterintelligence to the effect that they were on their way. The boys allegedly misguided the troops to dangerous banks of River Ndonga, a tributary of River Katsina-Allah that flows from Nigeria. According to sources, there were no survivors among the terrorists. A quick reminder that the Ghost Town campaign, otherwise known as Country Sunday, continues tomorrow, Easter Monday. And this reminder was delivered to the loudmouth dull Lord Mayor of Boya, Patrick Ekema, to learn from the colonial administrators who have learned to respect the laws of Ambazonia.
As you all see, the DO's office is very close. They are respecting ghost towns. And the stupid joke Bele Ekema Mayor is walking about, sealing small shops, sealing business places of people who are not opened on this day. But we can all rightly see how the DO's office is closed.
You are listening to Ambazonia Calling, your space for educated news analysis, informed opinions and commentary towards the recognition of a free, independent Ambazonia. I am Ntumfoyn. Stay with us.
I'm holding Innocent right here for the second part of our news wrap-up for the week.
General Ayeke in LEBIALEM has given Ambazonians an update of his situation.
General Ayeke is LEBIALEM, Assistant Commander, Red Dragon. I salute all Ambazonian people, home and abroad. I want to give you a small message.
Distancing himself from the ADF of Cho Ayaba and refuting claims that the ADF rescued him on the battlefield.
I want to tell Ambazonian people, say, me, I need to work with ADF, and I know we don't work with them before. I don't know Ayaba Cho, even phone call, we don't give me one day. And ADF not be rescue me. Now lie.
General Ayeke admits there was a small misunderstanding between him and the field marshal, the one he calls my former boss.
I began small misunderstanding with my former boss, Fimasha. It don't be soft. Thanks to Mr. Eric Tato, we don't try to solve the problem.
He hopes to be able to continue to work on liberation, even if he has no intention of returning to the same camp as Field Marshal.
And I want to tell again the PRM people in particular, say for free this land, I no must stay in the same camp with Fimasha. I no must live on the same bed with him.
Chris Anu, embattled spokesman of the IG group, has confirmed to Daybreak Africa on Voice of America that Ambazonians in the diaspora are now more determined to provide the military gear Amba boys and girls need on ground zero to prosecute the war.
And Cameroon separatists say they are emboldened following their Berlin conference.
We are determined more than ever before to provide our boys in Ambazonia every piece of equipment they need to withstand the army of French Cameroon.
According to Chris Anu, the stakeholders conference held last week in Berlin, Germany, was a major boost for the struggle.
One of the main reasons we put that conference together to re-energize and reinvigorate our people towards supporting the war, and I think that we left there with everyone very, very revived and enthusiastic about raising support to support our boys who are defending the territory.
Chris Anu offered that it is the Biya regime that has rejected any form of dialogue.
Paul Biya and French Cameroon have refused to come to any negotiating table or initiate any form of dialogue or initiation, despite all pressure upon them to do so by the international community. And so we figure out the only option that we have is to prosecute this war with all the military might and force that we can afford.
On disarmament, Chris Anu stressed that Ambazonians have no intention to lay down their weapons.
We cannot lay down our arms because we did not declare war and we are occupying no other territory other than Ambazonia. He hasn't initiated any dialogue, and should he initiate one, we would be the ones asking him to withdraw his troops from our territory. Once these troops are withdrawn from our territory, we can then think of sitting down with him to discuss the terms of separation.
The corpse of one of our fighters, for front mortuary.
In Bisson-Abang Southern Zone, a vigilante group working with La République du Cameroon to identify, point out the hideout of Amba boys and get them killed has been formed, scandalizing fighters.
Bisson-Abang people don't form vigilante for work with military, for hand over our boys to military.
One fighter was killed in the course of the week as a result of intelligence passed to La République du Cameroon soldiers. It is a worrying trend because another vigilante group had been formed in Ishobi, also in the southern zone.
Don't do something again.
Commanders on the ground say it is urgent that the trend of Ambazonians working as collaborators be stemmed fastest.
Something urgent has to be done.
A delegation from Human Rights Watch was denied entry into Cameroon earlier in the week. No reasons given.
Immigration officers at the Douala International Airport in the country's economic capital gave no reason for the decision except to state that they were acting on instructions from our top hierarchy, that is in quotes.
The latest numbers regarding casualties of the ongoing war laid out in a press statement from the Southern Cameroon's Leadership Council, SCLC, earlier this week.
The genocidal violence has so far left no fewer than 10,000 people killed or maimed, with more than 120,000 people who have fled into exile in refugee camps in neighboring Nigeria. No fewer than 2 million people are internally displaced in what the UN has described as the biggest mass displacement crisis in Africa.
John Ba Akuro also seized the opportunity to revisit an incident that happened Friday last week, where tens of rice farmers, mostly women and children, were killed on their rice farms in Bafut when La République du Cameroon soldiers opened fire on them indiscriminately.
Rice farmers in Bafut were ruthlessly killed on their farms by a contingent of the Elite Force B. Tens of women, children, and the very old who were working on their crops were massacred in the operation. This campaign of mass murder of unarmed civilians must stop.
The leader of the consortium also revisited calls by the SCLC for the UN to send a preventive humanitarian force.
The SCLC calls on the United Nations to send a preventive humanitarian mission to Ambazonia without further delay, so as to arrest the unfolding of another Rwanda-type genocide under their watch.
The brave Muslim scholar and fearless Ambazonians on Equinox TV, Abdul Karim Ali, is reminding Cameroon and the world that Ambazonians were never taken seriously after AAC 1 and 2.
We were not taken seriously as Southern Cameroonians. Nothing in those resolutions have been implemented.
Today, says Abdul Karim, a majority of Ambazonians would vote for independence, although he offers justification for why the Cardinal Tumi AGC conference might still have some use.
He asked me openly and fairly, majority want total restoration of their independence. That notwithstanding, we have people who still think that federation is a possibility, decentralization is a possibility, a union is a possibility. So it is very fair for the Cardinal to say, with these various thoughts, differential opinions, it's good to have an all-Anglophone conference to sit and really decide what we want if we have to talk to the government of the Republic.
He also explains that La République du Cameroon is trying to avoid talking to the very people they must talk to for any solution to be found.
The very people they eat so much and they don't want to talk to are the people they have to talk to. Allow for a fair, all-inclusive Southern Cameroonian conference, and Southern Cameroonians will tell you who their leader is. When I say all-inclusive, those in the diaspora should be allowed to come through amnesty. Those in the jails should come out. Those in the bushes should be given total amnesty to be able to freely express themselves. And then you would know who the leadership of Southern Cameroon is.
He urges La République du Cameroon to tackle the issue head-on instead of running circles around it, playing cat and mouse, or what he calls in pidgin, tumbu tumbu, boss calabar tita belem boss.
I say the government is just playing ini mini mini more. In pidgin we call it tumbu tumbu boss calabash, but we are far grown than that. Come on, we are not stupid.
A Liberian aid worker has admitted that it is very difficult to ascertain the number of internally displaced persons.
Some figures say 400,000, some figures say 100,000, 200,000. There's a lot of misunderstanding of who's telling what.
He also acknowledges that the seriousness of the war unfolding in Ambazonia, comparing the situation to the war situations he witnessed in his native Liberia, but also similar to situations of war elsewhere in Africa with potentially damning consequences for civilians, notably women, once the war is over.
When you listen to the stories, it's the same stories that you hear, not just from Liberia, it's the stories you hear in Sierra Leone, the stories you hear from survivors of the crisis with the Boko Haram, it's the stories that South Sudanese women have told, especially as it relates to everywhere in Africa that we've had conflicts, not just the impact now, but looking at the future impact in terms of the social economic impact on women's lives.
The spokesperson for the National AK Program, NAC, says they are launching a grand armament program in direct response to La République du Cameroon ordering Ambazonians to lay down their weapons.
I stand for here like the spokesman for NAC, for say with the announced armament, a great armament program. Say as they say me with this arm, not time for we for arm.
The calls were made on the diaspora to arm not only fighters but their own parents.
If you know if buy AK for the boy the one fight, at least buy the one for your mommy or for your papa.
From last week, video has gone viral on social media showing Amba boys display weapons they harvested from fallen La République du Cameroon soldiers. After a brief chat among the soldiers and a blessing of the weapons, one of them picks up the AK-47 and lets off a volley of bullets to the approval of fellow fighters. Audio of gunshots ringing out in one community in Ambazonia where the war continues to intensify. This audio from video shot by a civilian hiding end with the young man turning the camera to capture his terrified face. Finally, caution to watch out whose funeral you are going to attend in Ambazonia. A diabolical plot has been revealed by which the terrorist genocidal forces of La République du Cameroon will be organizing funerals in villages. The idea is to attract unsuspecting Amba boys to lure them to one place where they think they are coming to mourn for a fellow fighter, only to be met by the military junta of Biya in civilian clothes. So what to do? Well, make sure you know whose funeral you are going to attend. Make sure a trustworthy family member confirms. And above all, cut down on how many Amba boys attend events that they are not controlling completely. Innocentia, Ambazonia Calling.
This is Ambazonia. One nation, one soul, one people. Sacrificing, bleeding, and yes, dying if need be, until we kick the colonialists out and enthrone a government of the people in BOYO. The Universal Catholic Church and France lost a cathedral this week when Notre Dame Cathedral in the heart of Paris went up in flames. But as Nafrida now reports, her very first assignment on this Easter Sunday morning on Ambazonia Calling, France has been burning down cathedrals all across Ambazonia. Here's her story.
The people of Paris, the visitors, the residents, they've responded. We hear them singing, they're praying, they're bringing, they're singing these hymns.
Notre Dame is on fire. France is on fire. The cathedral where Napoleon crowned himself king is on fire. A symbol of repression is on fire. Fire is not new to France because France has used fire as a weapon. In Cameroon, in the early 50s, late 50s and early 60s, the Bamileke country was burnt down to enable them succumb to French rule. That is what France is doing to Ambazonia today. Think of what was done in Algeria and Guinea. Before the French left Guinea, they burned down everything they brought in there. They thought Guinea was going to be on its knees. Guinea is still existing. They think God has forgotten. I would like to remind you that God does not live in a building. God lives in the hearts of men. God finds a place in the hearts of men. The same feeling that the French have now that makes them sing as Notre Dame burns off is the same feeling that the old woman in Kikaikilaki, in Kwakwa, in Kom, in Batbo, in Widikum feels when her little wooden house full of corn is burnt down by French-speaking soldiers. The corn and that house is that old woman's cathedral. Let France feel the hurt. France will rebuild. It will rebuild the cathedral. Total will rebuild it. Gucci will rebuild it. France also holds half the money of French-speaking colonies. We're dying of poverty, and half of our money is in France. They will rebuild, but the wrath of God does not know if France is the decision maker in the Security Council in the United Nations. As the old woman cries, as her voice goes up, like Abel's voice went up, God is listening, and in due time, he will respond. This is Nafrida for Ambazonia Calling.
The full extent of the evil perpetrated by colonization is shocking. It is especially shocking when you consider French colonization, which began in 1830 when for the first time the French conquered the city of Algiers, capital of Algeria today. It has not stopped. It is part of what's going on in Ambazonia at this moment. We put together this short report on exactly how French policy has not changed since 1830.
What's known as the Second French Colonial Empire in Africa began with the conquest of Algiers in 1830. And so began the decades of economic slavery, theft of natural resources, and subjugation of local authorities.
And that continues to be their policy today.
France had a thirst for energy to become a global power.
And that continues to be their policy today.
The French did almost everything to keep their grip on Africa. And in trying to keep it, human lives did not matter to them at all.
And that continues to be their policy today.
Those close to General de Gaulle developed a network including unpopular African politicians and intelligence agents to maintain control in the former colonies and protect France's economic interests.
And that continues to be their policy today.
Ever since, successive French governments have often intervened militarily in Africa to keep puppet regimes in power.
And that continues to be their policy today.
Many French presidents have pledged to end their country's domination of African nations and treat them as partners and equals. But in practice, nothing has changed.
And that continues to be their policy today.
French President Emmanuel Macron was once especially energetic while talking about his plans to shift policy towards Africa. Before taking office, he stepped up criticism of his country's colonial past. He said it involved barbaric acts and are today known as crimes against humanity.
And that continues to be their policy today.
Former French President Jacques Chirac acknowledged that without Africa, France will slide down into the rank of a third world power. Today, Africa is grappling with many acute problems like endless conflicts, abject poverty, overdependence on international aid, and lack of effective leadership and management. Many of these challenges have their roots in Africa's past and present relations with France. What's obvious is that Africa still has a big French problem.
There you have it. If you were still wondering who to blame, that report tells you exactly what to do. The French need to get out of Africa. They need to get out of Ambazonia. That's who we should blame for part of our problems. But there's a part that we must blame on ourselves. The lack of leadership, the lack of partnership, the lack of that nuclear bomb that we could build together, which is called unified action. Here's Willie Brother Day.
After 3 different conferences to bring together various factions and groups involved in the Ambazonia recognition quest, the internecine sniping that has threatened to derail this revolution seems to be continuing unabated. This disturbing state of affairs can be best described as a secular firing squad, given our propensity to attack and denigrate each other instead of directing our ire at the enemy who is wreaking havoc in our homeland. From the look of things, an Ambazonian is more likely to be brought down by friendly fire than by the cannons of La République du Cameroun, metaphorically speaking. How else can one describe a struggle that seems to be focusing more on taking down the ally than the common enemy? For many months now, Ambazonians have been at each other's throat over disagreements in strategy to the extent that they treat their brothers and sisters worse than they do the enemy. These public displays of distrust are playing right into the hands of the enemy, who is sparing no expense to change the narrative and fool the international opinion that this is an internal problem that they can handle on their own. Maybe all of us need to be reminded that while we are busy labeling and accusing each other of working for or facilitating the task of the enemy, La République du Cameroun sees us as a people who want to free themselves from subjugation, regardless of whether some of us are for total independence or for a return to a federation. In case some of us have forgotten, the consortium was banned and its leaders, Bala and Fontaine, locked up for 8 months for simply proposing a return to the 1961 Federation as a solution to the problems they were dealing with. And Manchu BBC and others are serving prison sentences of up to 13 years for the same thing. So, if the enemy is making no distinctions, why are we busy hurting ourselves with such foolish, divisive rhetoric? Right now, over 200 villages have been partially or completely burnt or razed to the ground. As many as 10,000 of our citizens have been shot, or burnt to death by these terrorist soldiers, while almost 1 million of our people are internally displaced or seeking refuge in Nigeria. Were these people asked if they were for independence or a federation before they were shot at or their homes and means of livelihood destroyed? When the soldiers fired indiscriminately into the neighborhoods and bushes, do they ask to find out if they are enablers of colonization or Ambazonians? The answer, of course, is no. La République does not see restorationists, separatists, or federalists. They just see Anglophones, as they refer to us, whom they want to maintain as their slaves and whose territory they covet. Whether we choose to label ourselves various derogatory names is irrelevant to them. So, my people, we need to wake up from this collective spell we have been under for 57 years and realize that we are an endangered species who can only survive by working together. Though a cliché, the saying, united we stand, divided we fall, has never been more apropos than in our current situation. This is Willibrod Ade for Ambazonia Calling.
It started like a joke and I smiled. From Meme to Momo, we said no violence. Now I know not how to smile, 'cause my loved ones are gone. There is no place to call home. Our homes have been burnt. I am homeless in my homeland. There is no place to call my home. Homeless, homeless, homeless in my homeland. When are we going to have a dialogue? We have buried more than enough. Nothing heals the past like time. When are we going to have a dialogue? We've been marginalized enough. You may fool some people sometime. You cannot fool them all the time. Homeless, homeless. I am homeless in my whole life.
Every liberation movement involved with the Ambazonian revolution speaks very, very highly about the unique skills that women bring and the need for space to be created for them to bloom in the course of this revolution. Every group speaks about it, but it looks like no group is really doing something about it. Barrister Amba has got our report on what exactly is going on. Just before we roll our report, let me make one correction. There is mention in that report about the creation of a Directorate for Women Affairs. The resolutions, as a matter of fact, out of Berlin mention the Confederation of Ambazonian Women. So, that small correction, and here now is Barrister Amba.
James Brown, the godfather of soul, in his 1966 classic titled "It is a Man's World." Brown's famous lyrics, "This is a man's world, but it wouldn't be nothing without a woman," ring as true today as they did when he first sang them. The Ambazonia liberation struggle seems to be stuck with that truth, but regrettably only partially. Practically every group at every gathering acknowledges that women are a force to reckon with and a vital part of the struggle. Some groups are actually trying to match words with action. The AGOV-C, for instance, has women serving as spokespersons, press secretaries, intelligence officers. The IG group has women in the role of country heads, finance officers, and even a couple of secretaries and undersecretaries of some departments. Ambazonian women themselves have been heard repeatedly denouncing male-dominated leadership and declaring themselves willing, able, and ready to take over the revolution if men don't put on their big boy pants and start acting right. Takumbang in the streets of New York on September 22, 2017, was born of such a desire. After New York, however, one had to wait for the so-called Unity Rally outside the White House in August 2018 for leaders to be heard reminding themselves about the need to accord more space to women. Leaders spoke eloquently and captivatingly on the issue, their words, however, ringing false when checked against the scandal that just the night before the rally, the lone female leader among them had been kept out of their exclusive male-only dinner and meeting. The Ambazonia People's National Conference, the APNC, that held in Philadelphia in early February 2019, was silent on the issue of women in the revolution. The recently concluded All Southern Cameroon People's Conference, the ASCPC, that held in Washington, D.C., in one of its resolutions, called for gender initiatives. In fact, the Southern Cameroon Liberation Council, the collaborative platform birthed from the ASCPC, admitted a certain unknown Salili Kowo in the leadership team, representing a hitherto unknown Federation of Southern Cameroon's women organization. Salili Kowo, according to the SCLC, however, remains masked for security reasons given that she is based in Ground Zero. The Ambazonia Stakeholders Strategic Conference, the ASSC, that held in Berlin, Germany early this month, declared its recognition of the bravery of women in the struggle and resolved that a Directorate of Women's Affairs was to be added to the ever-growing structures of the IG group. How then does one explain the fact that women are so present, yet so absent?
This is a man's world.
How does it happen that when a woman is admitted, as in the case of Salili Kowo, she is so unknown that some have mockingly referred to her as ghost or phantom woman? How is it that at the same Berlin Stakeholder Conference, where the bravery of women was recognized and a Directorate of Women's Affairs created, a representative of the Southern Cameroon's European Women's Group, the SCEW, was refused entry into a key session?
This is a man's world.
Who is fooling who? Is it the men who seem to be singing a sweet melody of recognition, appreciation, and inclusiveness of women folk, but practicing exclusion and undermining when it really counts? Is it the women themselves who seem to be singing their own sweet melody of preparedness to sit at the table as equals with men, yet fail to follow through with meaningful action, or simply allow themselves, at critical moments, to be silenced, manipulated, relegated to mere hand clappers, praise singers for the men, or staff in the kitchen, while the men break the political kola nut, drink palm wine and sha in the living rooms of power? What is stopping millions of us Ambazonian women who care so much about keeping this revolution on the right path from organizing, strengthening, and positioning ourselves to be able to actually sit on those tables of power, influence decisions and direction? Every Ambazonian woman listening to me right now has the ability to change the status quo, change the game for motherland Ambazonia. So I ask, what are we waiting for? Are we resigned to the fact that it is a man's world? Or do we agree with James Brown that it is a man's world, but it wouldn't be anything without a woman? This is C. Ajimvo Ambe for Ambazonia Calling.
This is a man's world. But it wouldn't be nothing without a woman on the day.
Since the days of John the Baptist, the kingdom of God suffered violence. Only the violent one takes it by force. Your underground king, boom. You the cry, about what the cry. Don't tire, about what why.
Women are the cry, boy are the cry, about what they cry, we the cry, not free me, women are the cry, boy are the cry, we the cry, not free me, women are the cry,
na free. Amango today inside pay, you know the free. We president on the side say all man of yay. Grand ambition, fuck that slogan, no yay. Presido, the pay jaga jaga. Una take all in the people scatter scatter. They need 102 students for send address. Una select 2 Anglophones, scan address. Bia, young, vision, treason. Eske we know why man show BBC they for prison. They don't some all we then start for colors Anglophones. Fuck up the government, we ain't tools. Minister for communication, no fit talk good English. Southern Cameroon independence, that's my wish. No good third roads, no seaports, no light, no water, no airports. President, you overget fake promises. Wait to happen, failing us, you bring us diseases. But men are the cry, we are the ask why. You don't come for that chair, you don't go shake, you go die.
Men are the crying, we are the crying. About what they crying, me they crying. No, not free me, but men are the crying, we are the crying, me they crying. No, not free
Welcome to our special interview segment, The Devil Unmasked, The Truth Out. John Akuru is going to be hosting The Devil Unmasked today. It's going to be focused on a series of interviews which he conducted with board members of the Ambazonia Relief Fund, the joint fund of the Southern Cameroon's Liberation Council. And John asked them a series of questions based around a certain number of themes, opening up with how they felt about this moment when organizations are collaborating, they're acting from a unified front.
And we met and we are very excited.
Mr. Songwe Michael, pioneer board chairman of the Ambazonia Relief Fund.
I'm very excited to be the pioneer chairman, and that comes with a lot of responsibility. Personally, I'm very excited that at last we've come together as a unified front of all the leaders, all the frontline leaders, to form one unified front so as to push this struggle forward. What delayed us was disunity, and now we are fully unified.
We've been longing to see a situation where all the leaders will come together and work as one.
Mr. Chepe Emmanuel, representative of the interim government.
I'm delighted to see that the leaders are now working together. And as a member of the board of the Relief Fund for SCRC, it's wonderful. And we look forward to beautiful things happening for our struggle as a whole. This is something we've been looking forward to a long time ago, even in the days of Skakov. Back in my constituency, which is the Southeast, it has always been our wish that we work together. And it's a wonderful thing. I think I see a bright future coming for our struggle as a whole.
My impression of this right now is that there is hope. I can tell my people that there is definitely hope.
Bendalin sub.
And by being part of this treasury, I am pledging to every single Southern Cameroonian that whatever monies come into this treasury will be used for the sole purpose of liberating our homeland and taking care of our people in need. And so right now, I can tell you that there is hope, there is hope, there is hope.
A key concern that Ambazonians all have is the issue of accountability and transparency. Here's what members of the board had to say about it.
This group is out to give accountability, to render accountability to the entire Ambazonian people.
Mr. Songwe Michael.
There is nothing that is going to be hidden. The funds that are going to be raised are funds that will go for nothing else than financing the projects that will be identified to move forward this organization even further. Accountability is going to be number one.
We are determined to make this different. We are determined to be transparent. We are determined to be accountable.
Mr. Chepe Emmanuel.
And I want to entreat all Ambazonians. This is a dawn of a new day, people. This is a time for all of us to stand and make sure we fight for this struggle. And I want to assure you, as far as I'm concerned, any penny of yours that you contribute to this struggle will do exactly what you want it to do. And we are going to make sure we show everything that we do to you people.
I understand that financial statements are going to come out monthly.
Absolutely. In fact, that's our wish, to make sure we constantly update our people with financial updates, with expenditures and incomes. And our wish is to make sure we bring them out monthly. And I'm pretty sure that if we do that, our people will be more convinced and more happy to keep contributing to this struggle, because it is for all of us. I strongly believe that if our people see that their contributions are being used for what they are intended to, they'll be more than happy to contribute even more. And that is why we've decided that we have to show them those accounts all the time.
And because of all the naysayers, we have to make it upon ourselves to make sure that we deliver the goods.
Bending sub.
Because of all the concerns of the people, which legitimately they are concerned, and that is right. Things have happened. Let's not pretend that we don't know that funds have been raised, that we don't know how the money has been spent. So if they are raising any concerns, they absolutely have the full right to raise those concerns. To all those who are doubting that there is hope, and that if there was any moment you think it is a time for you to contribute or chip into anything in this struggle, this is the time, this is the moment. Because right now, I can only say it. We can only promise by word of mouth that we will make sure that the money goes where it should go to. That's all we can say. We can only hope that they will trust us. And I promise you, we will make sure we have monthly statements to show to all our donors or all those who will be contributing where their money is going to and what is being done. That is the only way we can ensure transparency in all the money that comes in. And I'm glad, because with the board that is there, money just doesn't go out under one person doesn't make the decision to have money go out.
I just want to let you guys know that this is going to be a very good program. Personally, I don't belong to any organization.
Mr. Atekris.
And I know what it means to be accountable, and I see that this program is going to account for every dollar that comes in from every part of the world, and it will be used in manners which everybody will be happy, and so you should have no fears on.
It is a big concern among Ambazonians that organizations that constitute a treasury do not run away with the treasury, and also that leaders don't have their hands in the cookie jar. The board of ARF says they will make sure that all funds go to projects, not to organizations, and definitely not to leaders.
This is going to be an independent unit.
Mr. Songwe Michael.
Funds are distributed based on projects, not based on frontline leadership or organizations.
One last concern, will the money be shared out to the various groups to carry out their own projects, or how will the money be spent?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. We don't have groups. There exists an SCLC, yes. There exists an ARF, which is a unique treasury. So in the ARF, we do not recognize groups.
Bending sub.
Wherever we receive any project or whatever project comes from anywhere, it doesn't matter who brings in the project, it is taken care of or looked into as the board and taken care of. So there's nothing like groups or this group, nothing is being distributed to any group. Absolutely no. There is no group as far as ARF is concerned. No money is going to an individual group whatsoever. We are here to take care of projects, take care of our people who are on the ground, who are displaced, who are homeless today.
Now, you had previously belonged to SCAPAC, yes. I recall.
Yes.
And, this is an organization or a structure that looks very much alike. Okay. So, but there have been a lot of fears in the struggle with respect to, accountability, transparency. What measures have you people put in place today at the end of your first board meeting to make sure these concerns are taken into account?
Well, I'm saying it's a very good, similar to what we had at Ska Park.
Mr. Atekris?
But we have all the expertise that we will need to run this program. And again, my thing is for everybody to rest assured that everything will be accounted for.
Board members of the Ambazonia Relief Fund started off the fundraiser amongst themselves during their first board meeting yesterday, Saturday.
We need as much funds as possible.
Mr. Songwe Michael?
The various board members should go out to their respective organizations and raise as much money as possible so as to fund this group. We look forward to working with everyone to dig deep into their pockets and raise as much money as possible to help this foundation go forward.
Yeah, I noticed that the chairman of the board decided that during this meeting, you people who are the board members should teach by example.
When you teach by example, that is the way to go.
Bending sub.
I wasn't really taken aback. I think that just made me understand that he is very conscious, and that for him to be the chairman and to have raised such an amount on the first day of the board meeting tells me that something is on the pipeline, that something is going to be done.
He personally put down $1,000.
He did put down $1,000, and every single member here present did contribute to start the fundraiser. So the fundraiser has officially been launched. I don't know about you guys, but as far as we in the board are concerned, it has been officially been launched. This is our struggle, and everybody is in it to win. So right now, every single member of the board right now has chipped in something to start this fundraiser. Hopefully, by next week, we'll have the money coming in, and our people will feel the relief of what we are working on today.
One other issue the board wants to clarify is the independence of the movements to continue to raise money for themselves.
We have not dissolved any of those groups.
Mr. Songwe Michael?
But we are hoping that those groups will band together to raise funds into one treasury. There should be no fear as to how these funds are going to be used.
So get on now on the train, everybody. Get on now on the train. Mothers, fathers, get on now on the train. Children, get on now on the train. Sister, brothers, get on now on the train. Husbands, wives too, get on now on the train. Oh, Abba, Father, bless us. Oh, Jesus Christus, guide us. Oh, Holy Spirit, lead us on the restoration journey of our liberty. So, restoration train is our freedom train.
One thing that's become very obvious in this revolution is the level of intolerance that Ambazonians show, the level of fanaticism around groups or around leaders. It's as if they were begging for tyranny. Daniel Jude Agua Ozugen says it is all about a one-party hangover.
The Ambazonia revolution is suffering from several forms of affliction. The most dangerous of the political diseases Ambazonians are still suffering from is what I will call the one-party hangover. For a people who are fleeing tyranny and dictatorship, illegitimate government, and the surrogacy of CPDM motions of support, it is baffling that Ambazonians are so contaminated by the evil from La Republique that they seek to justify it. Like supporters of the BI regime, they want Ambazonians to show unquestionable allegiance to their movement. It is all hail to the chief of each group, exactly as Issa Chiroma and Paul Atanganji hail Paul Biya. Depending on where you belong, you see no evil. ARC is it. Forget the SCLC. To justify their intolerance, every side, whenever it is convenient, cites the fact that we are in a revolution. That is the official excuse for surrendering liberties, including the right to criticize, to demand accountability and transparency, to request that leaders seek legitimacy from the people. Someone on social media has issued a threat ever since I started reading this paper against another Ambazonia who just happens to support a different group. If they don't worship, then the accusations fly all over. They must be agents of La République. They are enablers. They are sponsored by the Biya regime. Political pluralism is not bad. It has never been bad and never will be. Ambazonia can never get it wrong by letting a zillion political opinions bloom. Look at the United States of America. There are no fewer than 20 candidates seeking the nomination of the Democratic Party for the White House. If there is a message from America's political system to Ambazonia, it is a call for us to stop fretting over what we see as a splintering of groups. The more political liberty, the merrier a country we will build. What Ambazonians should fear and guard against is groups that decree themselves who they are not. Groups that arrogate to themselves powers that have not been confided in them by the sovereign people. People who have set up kangaroo courts, who arrest, try, imprison, and even execute those they consider enemies of our revolution. Those who seek to ban or harm others. The Ambazonia a majority of our citizens would like to see is one big enough for all political views. Big groups matter as much as small ones. The smart and intelligent are just as important as the dull and ignorant, for as the Desiderata says, they too have their story, and they have a right to be here. Our victory, by the way, will not necessarily come from the big and powerful, but from the ordained of the Lord. Ambazonians who want a free country must stop struggling to build a one-party system. Those who are still drunk from drinking of the one-party fruit under colonial Cameroon must start a political detox before the one-party hangover ruins our dreams of an Ambazonia where freedom reigns. This is Tanya Jude Agua Ozugen for Ambazonia Calling.
We don't do foolish, but when there are capital fools out there, we make it our duty to find them, and every week we crown one of them the Nyamfuka of the Week. Veronique Vitimfe has got the rundown of our kings and queens of foolish for this week.
Finishing in third place are French parliamentarians in the European Parliament, MPs of the racist far right, led by the not-so-honorable Jean-Luc Schaffhauser. They tried to water down an already toothless resolution this week on Cameroon. These French deputies tried to hide behind the concept of non-interference in internal affairs of Cameroon. Wow. The French, professing belief in the principle of non-interference in the Cameroons. These are the same people who have imposed a colonial tax on Africa, who preside over colonial so-called cooperation agreements, under which France owns the natural resources of French-speaking Africa, is in charge of its military, mints their currency, holds their reserves, and can invade any country where French interests are in jeopardy. These are the hypocrites who cried non-interference on the floor of the European Parliament this week. The French are already Nyamfuka every day, but after their racist parliamentarians pretended that Cameroon is a country, not an overseas province of France, they earned the third place finish for the crown of shame, the Nyamfuka of the Week.
Nyamfuka them all.
She does not recognize Ambazonia, does not consider herself an Ambazonian. She is on a tour of the Americas, speaking as one who understands the plight of Ambazonians. After trying and failing to win the presidency in La République and realizing that time is running out when she could be rewarded with a bone from the master's table, Edith Kawala showed up in the United States. Her one goal on this trip is to blame the victims of the massacres in Ambazonia. If anyone has been killed, it is their fault for going out on the 22nd of September and 1st of October 2017, knowing fully well that the BIA forces will open fire on them. It is also the fault of the leaders who dared to ask them to come out and celebrate independence peacefully. That is the kind of reasoning that a brainwashed Edith Kawala can hold these days. It would seem she no longer remembers that she herself has previously called for the same street protest. What a shame that Edith Kawala has lost it. That is how she fully deserves the second place finish of the Crown of Shame, the Nyamfuka of the Week.
Nyamfuka them all.
The wailing you just heard there, the fake mourners you hear there, are hired to stage this kind of stupid drama. The fake crying is coming from pro-regime women who gathered at a workshop in Bamenda, in Ambazonia's northern zone. The workshop was sponsored by the German embassy in Yaoundé, and this particular scene in the comic strip, no doubt, meant to show the world that the women of Ambazonia are begging their murderers to save them and their children. If you believe these outrageous performances, then there is a scene during the Second World War where Jews ran to Hitler's gas chambers for protection. It never happened, of course. The donors who are encouraging this rubbish from Yaoundé, led by the United Nations, need to stop. Rape victims do not run to the rapists for protection, and Lele Lafrique is the lead rapist. And the political ashawos using these performances to beg for appointments in the BIA regime are this week's winners of the Crown of Shame, the Nyamfuka of the Week.
Nyamfuka them all.
This is Veronique Vertimfe for Ambazonia Calling.
Kavizendo te inangi nilingi. Hey hey oh. Hey 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 oh.
One thing that tends to happen with underrepresented people is that they do in fact stay underrepresented. They are powerless, they are never at the table except as part of the menu. That's how it happens that the issues about Ambazonia can be discussed before the European Parliament, before the UK Parliament, before the United Nations, before the African Union, without so much as consulting with Ambazonians. Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International can roll out reports. The State Department can roll out reports without ever consulting with Ambazonians. We even saw the Washington Post, which is supposed to be the gold standard for objective, for fair reporting, go into the Cameroons, produce a newspaper article and produce video on which they did not speak to any of the leaders of Ambazonia. Well, someone is furious about that. Here is Robinson Aretambe.
The international community is dodgy on the Southern Cameroon's Ambazonian problem, with the lone exception of the U.S. Congress, which invited an Ambazonian to testify before it. All other institutions claiming to be looking into this matter are running circles around Ambazonian leaders and groups. The United Nations, the African Union, the Commonwealth of Nations, the German Parliament Bundestag, the UK House of Commons, the European Parliament, all of them are talking with and have been talking to our colonizers, but none of them wants to speak to an Ambazonian delegation. How does any one of these organizations justify that they are indeed seeking to solve the problem by addressing its root causes when they would not even mention the root causes and will not talk to those affected by the problem? How can they qualify themselves as mediators or unbiased if they are talking only with one party to a war? The international community cannot keep talking to one party only and ignore the other party in a territorial dispute that has two protagonists. The European Parliament, just like the British government, is in touch with the genocidal regime of dictator Paul Biya. The European Parliament is being influenced by both France and Britain, who are the shameless protectorates of French Cameroon. The United Nations has not once tried to hear what Ambazonians seek, not once, despite years of protest outside the United Nations offices around the world, despite hundreds of protests outside the embassies of the UK, France, and others around the globe. The United Nations has not yet found the courage to uphold its own resolutions on the protection of refugees and the prevention of rendition. If the European Parliament had good intentions, they would have followed in the footsteps of the Congress of the United States of America. They would have invited a delegation of Ambazonia. During the recent hearing in the UK House of Commons, Honorable Tonia Antoniazzi asked the British Minister for Africa, Harriet Baldwin, if the minister would meet with the MP along with a delegation from Southern Cameroons to discuss the crisis, taking into consideration the wishes of Southern Cameroonians. Minister Baldwin dodged the question. She refused to answer the question. The British government is avoiding meeting with Ambazonians because Her Majesty government is in bed with the dictatorial regime of President Paul Biya. The UK government is hoping that it can use appearances before Parliament to window dress the matter by pretending to attend to it while royally ignoring it. The attitude of the UK government is in sharp contrast with the UK Parliament, as British MPs often express themselves, reflecting the views of Ambazonians in their communication in the House of Commons. The European Parliament this week promised that it would pass the matter over to the Security Council, where both Britain and France will use their veto power in order to grant the colonial wishes of France. Today, as during the 1950s, when our ancestors fought for and voted in favor of independence, including at the All-Party Conference in Manfi in August 1959, our people have been forced to fight not only the Biya regime, but the entire world. Ambazonians are not naive. We understand that the reaction of the European Parliament is a horrible and shameful international conspiracy. We, the people of Ambazonia, will do everything to make sure that this is the last generation that must endure this injustice. Our ancestors asked us to continue to fight for the restoration of our independence. We owe this resistance to them, and we must respect their wishes and not the wishes of two shameless colonial powers who think that the right to freedom is limited to colonial masters only. This is Robinson Aretambe in Glasgow, Scotland for Ambazonia Calling.
This is Ambazonia Calling.
Because you have your army of occupation out in West Cameroon, you believe that when the people will rise, even if you took the whole of the French army and added to yours, you will never bring them down.
And I call on all Cameroon soldiers to lay down their arms within Ambazonia and to turn their arms against the very system that has made them slaves in the land of their birth.
For more stories from around the world, go to the World Wide Web at themissionstribune.com, compassfreepress.com, and africafreedomnetwork.com.
Here is our letter to Joshua.
Dear Joshua, did you hear about the failure of the French parliamentarians to convince their colleagues in the European Parliament? They tried. They had the talking points. They were approved by your grandson, Manu Macron, who is facing all these cathedral problems. Now that the whole thing failed, your next step was to invite the parliamentarians to Angola. Oh my goodness. Oman Jifenji decided that the best thing would be to bring them to the Golden Trophy Festival. Everybody should come empty so they can go back loaded in gold, in retirement accounts. Why do you believe you're going to be able to shut off everyone with golden statues? It's not working anymore, Joshua. You need to come up with something new. Don't play the same dumb game every day. There are all these wild rumors out there about the fact that there's a coup d'etat being prepared. I mean, by who? Whose head are you looking for to claim that there's a coup d'etat? There's none, Joshua. I heard you were down, not feeling too well, and that you really needed to go to Europe. But you're not the only one who wants to go to Europe. I saw old boy Longe the other day, wailing like a child, going on his knees, on all fours. Did you pardon Longe yet? I mean, because those crocodile tears cannot be in vain. You can't just be shopping around for the crocodile tears you want from those women up in Abakwa town. Come on now. They cry for the fact that if this war continues, you may end up not giving them a position. That's one of the reasons why Edith Kawala is traveling around the world and advertising herself as the new, would-be minister. You should check her out. It's true you've had to tear gas her, water cannon her. She's had people in the streets wearing black, wearing white, wearing whatever. But all of a sudden, all the people who committed errors are the ones who asked for the demonstrations on the day she did not ask for demonstrations. I'm still waiting to hear Edith Kawala blame Martin Luther King for the demonstrations that led to the Civil Rights Act in the United States, or the Nelson Mandela ANC movement for the destruction of apartheid, or the communists that brought down the wall. I'm waiting to hear him condemn Maurice Kamto for bringing out the crowds, for asking people to demonstrate. I'm still waiting. When they have more political ambition than the league in which they should play, then they begin to behave like Edith Kawala. They start going around a bit cuckoo, looking for anyone to blame. Just anyone, even the dead. They got in the streets, that's why they were killed. It's their fault. Oh, you're talking about the girl who got raped? That's her fault too. What about the woman with the complicated pregnancy who had to undergo traditional surgery just outside La Quintini? It has to be her fault. I've heard of the progress you are making, Joshua. I heard you send Cardinal Tumi to meet with your superior, the ambassador of France, consult with them about the AGC, and then he showed up to report to you about what progress they are making. That's good. So what next? What next? What about disarmament? You're not going forward with it? What happened to the troops in Bali? The bullets were wet, they did not work? Look, Joshua, there's a time to joke, and you've had your time. Now it's time to get serious. The people of Ambazonia will never, ever again live under your people. You heard that? Capiche? Comprende? It's over, Joshua. Whatever union existed is over. From our studios here in Washington, D.C., our producer is Jeff McCoy. Our music today is from Ken Wanaku, the monk from Balikumato, William Ford, and Amba of blessed memory, Eric Matisse on the web at soundimage.org, and Prince Adjoa Alemanji of Ajam Sonic Kitron, USA. Ambazonia Calling is a joint production of Africa Freedom Network, the Missions Tribune, and Compass Free Press. You can find us on the web at www.themissionstribune.com, www.compassfreepress.com, and www.africafreedomnetwork.com. Next Sunday is another day. Until then, keep the spirit, keep the faith, keep up the fight for justice and independence for Ambazonia. Stay Amba strong.